Welcome to a new video from my social web. I'm Luis Fernandez, and we're going to continue with our series of artificial intelligence videos, in which we explain practical cases with quite simple scripts in Python, that you can apply to your projects to your clients, or that you can use as an apprenticeship to start working with programming and artificial intelligence. In this case, we're going to show you a very simple script in which we scrape a concrete URL, we obtain its main data, quite relevant data, and we ask ChatGPT to give us an EEAT or EEAT evaluation. Give us an evaluation of EEAT or EAT, as I'm going to call it from now on, since the extra one is a bit complicated to add always. And it will give us a complete evaluation of the content with the information we give it. As always, tell you that it is a very, very interesting tool, but it is still a generative way that still has a lot to improve, and that is why we are working with it, because we hope it will improve a lot. Over time it is advancing by leaps and bounds, and knowing how to work with this version, which we can call 1, 0 or 3, 5 as we are now with GPT, will allow us to work with much more advanced things in the future. This case can help us to get ideas of things that we have overlooked when we evaluate a page, or to mass evaluate a lot of URLs by adapting this code a little bit, and allow us to prioritize with a score which pages we have to start working on or review first. This is always Google itself doesn't even, the EAT is a complicated issue, and Google itself employs real people that go into web pages and review, among other things, these types of topics, especially in your money or life niches. So as always, I announce this as I'm posting this as a starter tool, as a template that you can use to expand and take advantage of it. Because although I was throwing you a little cold water, it is still something super powerful. And with a little bit of imagination and knowing how to use it, you can do things that you couldn't do before, or speed up processes that took a long time before. So this is a script worked, initially created by Alvaro Peña. Here you have his Twitter handle, iSocialWebSeo. I think almost all of you know him. And I have adapted it a bit, adding a couple of changes and expanding a little information, and here you have my Twitter handle there if you want to follow me. What I would tell you to follow is the YouTube channel Social Web. So a little YouTuber everything, but we have a very cool series of videos of artificial intelligence that, from the most basic to videos like this, are never super complex things for now, but they are new ideas and very, very usable applications in your projects. So without further ado, I'll stop with the intro and let's see the content, the code. As we always work with collabs, if you want a more advanced or more paused explanation, it is not a Python course either. You can watch the initial videos in which I explain everything a little bit more step by step, line by line, how everything works. But here we go straight to the point. We're going to work with the usual libraries, for example, OpenAI, and we're going to work with web scraping. We need to get the information of the URL that we want to analyze. We hope that our GPT chat will analyze its EAP. Then for that, we're going to use Beautiful Soup, that if you get into this, you're going to work with it a lot. It's one of the most used libraries because it is very easy to use and very light for web scraping. Very lightweight for web scraping. It allows us to scrape static webs, that is to say that they don't use JavaScript to generate content. They use not JavaScript, but things in the server a posteriori, if it is a web that generates the content in the client, if it is a web that generates the content in the client, if it is a web that generates the content in the client, if it is a web that generates the content in the client that normally work with reactive libraries of JavaScript. We will not be able to scrape it. We would have to move to simulate browsers like Selenium, PuBGT or similar. We are going to use Trafalatura, which allows us to easily extract certain content directly from the HTML. This is not so common, but in this case it is very useful, and you can use it as a very small library with some very specific functions, but quite useful. And we're going to add tick token that will explain to you next a little the application that has in this program, and the application that it has for other developments with AI, because it is very interesting, and that's why I wanted to include it here. Here we would execute, we would install everything. I have already done it. You can also add this capture command with 2% signs. This, what it does is that it avoids that it shows you here the output, the logs of all the installations, that when you are installing many things can become gigantic and be a little uncomfortable. Here we are going to pass for now. Here we would import all the necessary in these first lines, and we would pass to the only thing that you have to mark, that is your OpenAI API, as always. You have to have an API, you can generate it from OpenAI, and you see here that we have an input command. In this case, if we execute the cell, it is going to ask us directly, Instead of having to modify the stream, we are going to take the URL that we want to analyze. In this case, it is going to be this URL of energy newspaper. To have an example of any, we are going to copy it. And this is not the script, this one here. We are going to paste it here. Be careful that it does not write any typo, and there it is. And it's going to execute all the code quickly once we paste it. This you can adapt it as usual to upload a CSV, iterate through the CSV and pass various URLs. In this case, we're going to do it with only one, but it is very simple. You can take another collab of those that we have used in which we iterate in a CSV, and you can adapt it easily. So to explain a little bit the code, what we are going to see here is the extraction of the title in menu, text of the URL, and the footer down here. You see that we're going to make a fetch. We're going to make a call to the URL. We're going to take all the HTML, and we're going to take the title. Here we're going to take the complete article, and we are going to take the text of the web, and here we are going to do something that can be improved. I leave it in your hands if someone wants to work on it, or at least I leave you the idea. But in this case, what we're going to do is to take the text, and as the text can be an article of 1,000 words, or it can be an article of 7,000 or 200, what we're going to do is to keep the first 5,000 characters. We're going to simplify it. We're going to drop the first 5,000 characters in order not to go overboard with and to avoid sending too much content to GPT and that it starts to freak out a little bit. Here we are going to take the contents of the menu, and here below those of the footer. That is to say, we are going to take the title of the web, the text of the web, the elements of the menu, and the elements of the footer. The elements of the menu and the elements of the footer. These are 4 ideas that we give you. You can take more, you can take less. The footer is, for example, very interesting because being an IAT theme, the footer usually includes the legal notices, usually includes information about who we are, and so on. You will be able to scrape, for example, the scheme of the web, and you see that it is here. The possibilities are limited. Those that you have are unlimited. What you have to stay is with the concept that this is possible. And from there and go pulling you of the thread, this, however, is one. It is more than complete, and if you do not want to complicate you in going programming you with this, you are going to have also a very, very interesting result. And with all this information, what we're going to do is to create a prompt. And in the prompt, we're going to insert the contents that we have extracted dynamically. You see that the prompt here would be in orange. It is all this here. Quite big, it is quite complex. And you see that here we add the title, here we add the elements of the menu, and we mark it in OpenAI. That is to say, here is the title of the page. We give it some line breaks. Here are the elements of the menu. Here is the text, and here is the footer. And for all this, what I recommend you is to leave Colab and go to the playground of OpenAI. In this case, we have a playground of ChatGPT, which is a little bit different from the usual playground. And we can see here we have the usual parameters. We can save the presets. We can edit the model. We are going to edit the mode, the model, the temperature, the length, the top P, etc. And there we have things a little bit different if you have only worked with GPT-3. In this case, we have a command which is system, which allows us to give a function to the chat, because at the end of the day, this is a conversational model, that is, who is the chat? Here it can be that, an assistant that helps you. I don't have the translation of helpful now, but it could be a financial expert writer, or it could be, as in our case, a Google evaluator. Expert in terms of eating your money, your life. And here we would mark what his role is, and here we have what our promos would be, and we mark, it's mismarked here to show you. We have 2 options, or user or assistant. Here you have the whole prompt pasted. As you can see, it's very, very big. But let's see, we can add more than one. See? User or assistant. User would be us. What we are asking something to the chat and assistant would be the answer of the chat. And if what you can see here is that we can add more than one, we can mark our prom of user. Here we could take and add a reply. Generated by him or generated by us from assistant. We could be making a conversation if you notice. In this case, for this specific functionality, we do not need it. But you should know that it is possible, and it is the most common use or one of the advantages of the GPT chat. Apart from being 10 times cheaper and allowing us the GPT-3 and allowing us more tokens. So having that, we would run it, and you see here I'm printing the prompt to have it as an example so that you can see it, but well, this wouldn't be necessary. But here you can review everything. As always, you'll have the collab linked in the article on our website, or even in the YouTube video, leaving that aside. You can see that it is a giant prom, and this sometimes can cause problems, and also remember that we are cutting the content of the web. What is included below, and I mentioned before, is the tick token library with a couple of very useful functions. that we've left defined here that you can use in this collab or in other collabs. And what these functions do is count the number of tokens in a string, which is this second function here of a text string or a GPT chat message string. This is very, very useful. For example, what you can do here, let's activate it. Well, that's it. Let's execute it. It's already executed, and here we could make a count. If we execute this code, you see that we're going to pass it in this call. Calling this function here, numTokens from string, we're going to pass it the text of the web. That is to say, the text before trimming the 5,000 characters. And what it is going to tell us is this. We are going to go down. The content of the web has 776 tokens before trimming it. That is to say, these models work with tokens, not words. Otherwise, we would count words, and that's it. We wouldn't get complicated. But since we work with tokens, which is something that we can't just count by eye, we have to generate these functions that help us. And what allows us to do this is to say, okay, instead of cutting off the first 5,000 characters there without any reason, we can, for example, say, okay, as long as you don't go over the maximum number of tokens, which is 4,086 in GPT chat, don't cut. If you go over that, please advise me not to go over that. That would be an example. Another example of usefulness, for example, is to count what it is going to cost us to make all these requests. In this case, we are only asking for one URL, but imagine that we ask that we want to analyze 1,000 pages. How much is that going to cost us? We can generate all those messages and call the function number of tokens from messages. And in this case, since it's a single message, we see that it has 1,353 tokens, and it's going to cost us nothing, zero. $27, that is. This is multiplied by 1,000, 100,000, or the measures that normally move in the world of automation. It can be a relevant price, so keep this in mind. And I would keep these functions in a collab and use them. Leaving that aside, you see here we're going a little bit more. Leaving the number of tokens aside, we're going to go a little bit into the detail of the GPT versus GPT-3 chat implementation. Here you see that we are doing something very similar to what we saw in the playground. We have a list with 2 items. This is the first one. With 2 elements, this is the first element, this is the first element, and this is the second element, in square brackets. And the elements have the same members. They are dictionaries. It is JSON. You can call it in several ways. In this case, it is a role. It is system. That is role system, as you see here, and a role user, as is our other prompt. In the role system, we have a content, which is the one that we indicate what is going to be the chat, a Google quality evaluator in Spanish, etc., etc. And in our content, we pass it our prompt, which is what we have printed here. It is the whole complete function. Currently, the system function is of little use. It is said by the GPT chat developers themselves, and we have tested it a lot internally, and it is not very much taken into account. It is not very much taken into account. The model is not trained, or is not yet prepared to take into account, or give weight to the instructions that it finds inside the system. That's why in our case, if you notice, inside the prompt we are adding the same function. It acts as a Google quality evaluator in Spanish. Depending on the type of task that you are going to make, it is even advisable that you remove the role system to save touches, or you put a very small role system. If you are not going to do something very massive, but that you always emphasize it in the user, and as you can see, this is almost like GPT chat. We simply have a system and a prompt. This could be extended and more elements could be added. Here we could copy all this for simplicity, and we could even include a system response. In this case, it would be assistant. And here we could pass him an answer and ask him for a next one. He will always continue the conversation. We could pass him an assistant, then another user with another question, and continue working and building on it. And continue working and building on it. In this case, we are not going to do it. This way it is enough. That is to say, we are almost imitating the model of GPT-3, but in a cheaper way. Leaving that cell aside, we would already arrive at the call. As you can see, almost everything is information management and ordination. Then there is generation of the prompt, like all this type of tasks. Then the call, yes, what is artificial intelligence? It is super easy. It is a very simple API. In this case here, you see OpenAI chat completion. It has changed the name if we want GPT chat. Create and we pass the model, which is GPT chat 3.5 Turbo. ChatGPT is GPT 3.5 Turbo. We pass it our messages, our list of messages, and we can put a maximum of tokens or other typical parameters. You can see it in the documentation. We create a chat completion, and from the chat completion that is a JSON response with several parameters, the tokens that we have spent, etc. We keep the content of the message, and here we can print it out. And we can see the result that it gives us. You will see how cool it is. We have the quality classification of the page, an 8 out of 10. This is what I was telling you before. We can, for instance, send a lot of pages simply to classify, stay with the URLs that have lower page queue, page quality, and prioritize. Check those beforehand. That can already give us, if we work with very large sites, that can give us an image of directories that have better or worse quality than others, etc. Then we have an explanation. And it will explain step by step is that it is a fairly large content. The truth. The page presents relevant content and quality in relation to the purification of renewable energy, etc., etc. It is accurate and truthful. It lacks depth in certain areas. They tell you which areas you are missing information. I recommend reading it. The truth is that it is very complex. It is very complex in the sense that it is quite extensive, and it can help us to get ideas of things that we are missing, and it is things that we are missing, and if it is here further on, if you look at it, it includes suggestions to improve the content. Includes very common suggestions, for example, an idea links to reliable sources that support the information presented on the page. Here, if you notice, there is no link, so I already make no citation, so it's getting it right. This is always what I said, do not take it as the opinion of a blind consultant, but to get ideas is very, very useful. And then we have the three main entities of the text, and it shows us the entities. Here I have left you an example to see how it can fail or how not to fail, because they are entities, but they are not three entities. Here it is mixing several of them, and what it is doing is to take as a single entity this of here. All these mentioned in brackets, and here we are counting them as one. What if you have a system that tries to pass you everything pass to a more structured format? Could be a problem, or at least you would have to take into account. And in addition to this, I want to show you another example of real casuistry of ChatGPT, so that you have it, so that you do not believe that it is only all that glitters, that this is already a great thing, especially the pitch quality and the suggestions, that this is another request a little bit different. But what this does, however, sorry, it is not ChatGPT. This is made with GPD trees directly, and in this case, it is making me more case. The prompt call, if we go here, we're going to see that in one of the moments we tell it at the end of your analysis, it suggests a HUN header and an SEO title tag. I don't see any HUN or SEO title tag here. However, here with GPD trees, it still includes the suggested header. Gathered reform the planning process to accelerate the delivery of renewables and an SEO title tag. In this case, a tag that is quite successful, that is, it has understood the task perfectly. It adds the typical script name of the medium and a specific title. This has not happened in ChatGPT. Why could it be? Well, this may be that the prompt is not as well as it should be, or because of what we have been testing. The most probable and the function that I like to use the most is that we have sent too many things, too many tasks in a single request for the chat. What I was telling you before, that we can separate the requests in more than one, is ideal for this type of task. We could separate our different objectives into 3 calls within the same message. That is, we could or iterate in different messages. We can pass all the information and ask for a pitch quality in the first one. That with his response, we save it for the second one and ask him to give us an explanation and some suggestions. And finally, we ask him to give us the one. That it gives us the HUN, the title, and the entities of the content. And this way we can reuse all the calls, batch them in some way, and take advantage of the fact that this API has a certain memory. Take advantage that this API has a certain memory. Unlike the GPT-3, that each request is not memory because we send all the messages together. But well, it does not serve the closest thing that we have for now. And with that, we differentiate all the points of the call, and they give us all the results separately. Much easier to pass and to organize. And that would be all. Here you have the code perfectly functional with GPT chat. Probably we will include also the version of GPT-3 in case you want to use it. It is very similar. Practically changed 2 things, but well, so you have it at hand, and thank you very much. If you make any improvement, have any questions, want to share something or enter the conversation, we will continue uploading videos of this style on our YouTube channel, So do not forget to follow us, and thank you very much for your time. Greetings.